The US Treasury has now officially announced and confirmed as of this recent week that they will be ending the production of the penny starting at the very beginning of next year, so specifically the beginning of 2025. This was something that they already had thought about doing for several years now, and then they took particular action this year to really be able to make it happen. And now, as of the recent 1 week that has happened from the release of this video, it is official. They have announced that they will be ending the creation, or not the creation, but simply put the production, and they will no longer be making any more pennies. Why this is important is that because this is going to impact a lot of things in terms of how we do things in our daily lives. So for example, if we don't have the penny, change is going to potentially have to be rounded to the nearest nickel. And this is just one example of several changes that's going to happen in our daily lives. So the big idea is that in today's video, what I really want to talk about is really the background story and the breaking news to what's been going on with the ending of the production of the penny. I want to talk a little bit about why it's happening, why it's significant, why this is important, and maybe ending this with some personal thoughts about whether or not I support or don't support, or just personal thoughts about how I think this is going to impact a lot of the things and the ways we do things in daily lives. So even if you've seen another video about this, hopefully there's still something original to be able to get out of this video. But with that being said, let's just get right to this video. But as always, before we begin, like, comment, subscribe, or consider, subscribing if you guys want to. It is always greatly appreciated. And maybe feel free to leave a comment down below whether you do or do not support the end of the production of the penny. Because I know that there's some people that will think about the economics of this, which we're going to talk about. But there's also a lot of cultural significance that I think a lot of people are going to miss the penny for those particular reasons. It's going to make a lot more sense. So with that being said, let's get started. So to start this video, I think it's really important to understand the background story and the history to how the penny even came to be. And the story behind this one is that essentially the penny was something that was first introduced in ancient Rome, we'll just say over 1,000 years ago. However, it was first introduced in America, so specifically talking about the American penny, way back in 1792 under the Coinage Act, which so basically this was something that was introduced over 200 years ago. And when it very first came out, it was actually close to the size of a quarter, but the appearance and the size of the penny was evolved over the last couple of years, or rather couple of hundreds of years, so specifically about 200 years during that time period. And it apparently throughout these years, it ended up becoming evolved into the current smaller red size that you currently see today, which we all know as the Lincoln penny, so the penny that has President Lincoln's face on it. And a fun fact is that President Lincoln was actually the very first person to have a face or portrait put on a US currency, and is still in fact to this day on the penny itself, as most people probably already know, because I mean we have all seen a penny after all, right? And so why is this happening, and why are we discontinuing the penny? Well, the reason why we are discontinuing the penny has actually nothing to do with politics, it has nothing to do with cultural reasons, and it has everything to do with economics. Essentially, back in 2024, it was estimated that it cost nearly 3.7 cents to create a single penny, meaning that the cost to actually create a penny is actually greater than the value of the actual penny itself, which is literally valued at as obviously 1 cent. So it costed them 3.7 cents to create 1 cent. In other words, almost 4 times the value. And they estimated that they lost about $56 million for the US Mint to do this, with over 50% of the pennies that are in existence just placed literally inside of jars. So they found that essentially the penny is just something that is not as popular and not as used as it used to be. Now, in terms of why are they discontinuing the penny? Well, aside from the fact that we've already mentioned it comes down to economics, they've also found out that there's also been, just simply put, a decline in the actual usage of the penny. And it makes a lot of sense because today when you have things like Bitcoin, digital payment, tap wallets, systems, credit cards, and so many things that we did not have over 200 years ago when the penny was first introduced in America, the idea is that there's just not as much usage today as compared to back then. So these are just a couple of reasons why it's being discontinued. First is for economical reasons, and then the second reason is just because of the decline in usage, with inflation and everything happening, and the fact that we have so many different ways to pay for things today, such as again, going back Venmo, PayPal, credit cards, Bitcoin, just other ways that, payment systems, tap payment systems and all that. This is the reason why they're realizing that the penny, most pennies today are just simply put either being tossed aside or just left inside of jars. And that is the reason why they are discontinuing the penny. Now, with that being said, there are several ways that being discontinued is going to impact our daily lives. The first one, and it's more, I guess, the direct impact to us about how it's going to impact how we pay for things is that there is a say that because of what's going on, a lot of the prices that we typically pay for things will now get rounded to the nearest nickel, or rather the nearest multiple of 0.05. That is one first change that's going to potentially happen. But of course, this is going to be relatively obviously not as significant because, at the end of the day, we're just talking about a couple of cents. The other part that's really going to be impacted, and this is not necessarily related to finance per se, but it is still something important to bring up, is going to be a lot of the cultural impacts that this is going to have in our American culture. So what do I mean by this? If this sounds a little confusing, is that essentially there are a lot of areas of our daily lives where the penny represents something that's basically represents frugality. And the fact that many places today still sell things that end in a price of 99 cents. And because the logic behind this is that because paying 99 cents as opposed to a full dollar just makes things appear to be slightly cheaper, even though it's only just simply put 1 penny cheaper. And the idea is that because of that reason, it means that the penny was something that people used to give change when people had to pay things for a dollar, but they actually, paid things that actually were marked at 99 cents instead. This is obviously very, very insignificant because we're only talking about 1 penny, but it is still something that's important to just mention anyway. But the part that's actually probably even more important is that a lot of cultural things such as why we invest in things such as penny stocks for people that are interested in penny stocks, but even things such as charities, for example. There are a lot of places that do something known as the penny drive, which if you're not familiar with that, essentially what it is that there's a lot of charities that do something called the penny drive, where they essentially ask people to donate pennies, and they try to show how by donating a penny saved is a penny earned. So by simply donating a lot of pennies, what it does mean is that those little pennies can eventually add up to several dollars, or just simply put, a significantly larger amount than what there is. And on top of that, there's also a lot of people that are coin collectors. That's a perfect example as another way that it's going to impact the American culture. So these are just some things that are really, really important to bring up that I think is going to be very, very impactful to how this is going to influence daily lives. Some of this is going to be a practical thing that happens, but other things are going to be a little bit more cultural, but it's still important to really bring up because it is an impact and influence at the very, very end of the day. Now, how is this going to impact our country going in the future? Is that first off, is that maybe on one brighter news is that it is going to help our country save a lot of money. And specifically, as we've mentioned earlier, $56 million a year that was poured in to producing and the creation of the penny. We are going to be able to save $56 million that we can now allocate as a resource to spend into other areas of our country that maybe we want to, use that money for instead. So that's one very, very direct impact that I think it's going to, be able to help us, and maybe one benefit, because at the very, very end of the day, I think it's very fair to say most people love to save money. And if we can save money through to cutting the cost of creating the penny, this is going to be something great for our country. Another big thing to mention is that because of the cost of, or not the cost, but because of the end of the production of the penny, it's also going to cause a lot of stores to now start to round their prices to the nearest nickel, like we've just mentioned. So what this means is that when you see something that's currently marked at 99 cents or $1.99 or just some price that ends in the word 99, what's going to happen is that now potentially we're going to start to see things end in the word 95 instead. So in other words, 95 cents or $1.95 or just whatever dollar amount, 95. So that's just one area that's going to be impact. Now, they did say is that like when it comes to payments, you know, through like digital payment systems, so like credit cards, things will have no impact there, because at the end of the day, for stuff like that, obviously, you know, there is no change when you're paying in credit cards, or you know, you're paying with using a credit card, a tap payment system, Venmo. All of this stuff is still going to leave it the same way that you've been doing this for years and years, or since the creation of all of these payment systems. Now, to maybe end this video, I want to talk maybe just about some personal thoughts, you know, to make this video maybe somewhat original, which is really about whether I do or don't support this. And feel free to leave your comments down below. And this one, you're going to get opinions from all over the place because it is an opinionated part. But essentially, is this something that I support or is this something that I don't support? I will say this is that economically, I think it makes a lot of sense to end the penny, so I do kind of support it in that sense. However, culturally, I will say is that although I do support the fact that they're going to be ending the production of the penny, I do know is that deep down inside, I will miss the penny. Because I think at the end of the day, you know, with the penny, there are, like we've mentioned, a lot of cultural influences that the penny has. And I think that a lot of the things and the reasons why we will miss the penny is more sentimental. It's more because of what the penny actually represents. I know, for example, when I was a kid growing up in the 90s per se, so that's one example, you know, it used to be a thing where a lot of kids would start to pick up pennies on the street. Because the reason why is that picking up pennies on the street was a way to potentially just raise up more money. Like the saying goes, a penny saved is a penny earned. And so these are just some areas that I'm going to miss the penny. So, you know, is this one of those things that, you know, I think is important, I think is going to be a great influence to our country? Absolutely. I think it's going to help our country save economically, it's going to save money, it's going to help things become a lot easier, you know, so we don't have to carry as much pocket change in our pockets, so our pockets will also be physically lighter when it comes to how much we have to carry. But at the same time, I think I'm going to miss it in a lot of ways. You know, I think the penny has a sentimental value for a lot of us, you know, growing up, you know, especially if you were someone that was a penny collector that picked up pennies on the street or saved it inside of a jar to exchange at a bank for actual dollar bills. But of course, these are just some personal thoughts to maybe end this with, but feel free to share yours as well. So that being said, that's pretty much what I really just wanted to share in today's video. So if you guys hopefully found it insightful, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.